This video is for you if you are the type of person who constantly have to push yourself to achieve and you almost feel like there's not a choice, because if you stop trying so hard and not hitting all these goals that you made for yourself, then you feel anxious, you feel guilty, you feel like you couldn't relax. And it's also for those people who have maybe started to wonder, why am I trying so hard and making myself so exhausted? What's the meaning behind that achievement, that money? And specifically, if you are an immigrant, your parents are immigrants, or your family is from an Asian descent, then you will start to see overachieving, constantly working is a norm. And we will talk about why is this the case? And how do we find a midpoint where we feel good about ourselves, we are working, we are trying, we are honoring growth, but at the same time, we are not pushing ourselves to the point of burning out and exhaustion. First, let's talk about why immigrants, more often than not, are overachiever. I see that in immigrants, I see that in population where your family is from Asian country. And there is certain thing about the Asian culture that honors hard work, and you were taught to do that. But where does that culture come from? Because if we think about Asian culture, there's also Taoism or Lao Tzu constantly emphasis on Wu Wei, which means do nothing. So isn't that sounds a little bit contradictory when we're saying Asian kids are always working so hard, they're always achieving, their parents are always pushing them. And at the same time, if we look back at Chinese Asian philosophy 100,000 years ago, people are telling us to do nothing. So how do we reconcile that difference? This is what I'm observing. If you are an immigrant, where your home country is, your societal socioeconomic development is a little bit behind the US society. What I mean by that is we look at some of the very popular liberal topics, for example, mental health, LGBTQ, birthright. These are the things people are accepting it more than not in a more developed country. Right? It's a permitted thing in Europe, in US. People are advocating more on human rights, on living a comfortable, meaningful life instead of just working hard trying to get money. However, if you're looking at developing country, people hasn't really formed that awareness around it yet. In developing country, most of the population are focusing on making more money, going to college, getting a good job, get a stable life, so that you can get whatever monetary thing you need. We are still at a lower level of Maslow's hierarchy, and we haven't got to the top. As an immigrant, you are moving from a country that most people are struggling to get ends meet. Most people are thinking about just getting that good score will get you a good job, and a good paycheck will get you a nice home, and you can have a stable life. When you are moving to a country that's more developed economically, the goal changed. The goal becomes a higher level fulfillment. Is the upper part of Maslow's hierarchy. It talks about identity and belonging. We started to talk about who are you? What is the meaning of living? Are you feeling that you belong here? Do you have enough friends and social support system? So the question changed. And the reason why we are so focusing on achieving, if you ask your parents, why do you think it's so important that I become a lawyer, a doctor, achieve academically and professionally? Most of them will tell you, because I want you to have a good life. So in their definition, that is a good life. A good life is where you have financial freedom, where you have education, that guarantee that you have a stable job. Even if you just do the minimum, you just do the standard. Becoming a lawyer and doctor mean that you are going to have at least some money to help you live a pretty comfortable life. And that's what your parents wanted for you, because that's what they were struggling with. Now, there's a huge shift in how you perceive it right now as someone living in the country where a lot of people are talking about freedom, identity, talking about the meaning of life, talking about how do I enjoy myself rather than just work myself to death. There has been a lot of reflection, and these are reflections that you never thought about before. That creates a little bit of confusion. And let's go back to my previous point of looking at these great ancient philosophers, Lao Tzu, Zhangzi, Kongzi, we call it Confucianism. All of these great leaders, if you look at their kids, what do their kids do? You would imagine their kids should be really good too, right? Their kids are good. They lived a good life. However, they are not an overachiever. They don't achieve like their dad. They were not pressured to achieve like we were pressured to achieve by our parents. Why is it that when your parents is someone like Lao Tzu, Zhuangzi, Kongzi, but as their kid, you're not pushed to achieve? Because your parents have realized the true meaning of life. They no longer see the monetary value, the external validation as valid. They start to see the internal validation, the contentment, the satisfaction, and meaning of life is what actually matters. And that's how they taught their kids. That's why you don't see a great Asian philosopher has super successful famous kids. It's because they no longer need to push their kids anymore because they understand what is the true meaning of living. Now that you understand where that urge of constantly trying to perform to achieve come from, let's talk about what is your choice? What can you do about it? I've often heard a lot of people tell me, I don't have a choice. This is how I was born. And I just feel happier this way, or it just feels more comfortable for me to do this. That just reminded me of a conversation I had with my mom about the impact of family of origin. I was on a phone call with my mom and I was talking about why nowadays a lot of younger generation are interested in counseling, and their motivation to come to therapy and counseling is usually because of relationship. Briefly, I explained to her younger generation feel their marriage and intimate relationship is impacted by their parents' marriage and intimate relationship. And oftentimes the parents are not happy with their marriage. So the younger generation come back and want to work on it so that they can create a better life for their future family. And my mom responded to me. She said, I think people are putting so much stress on family of origin, especially this younger generation. And I said, yes, that is right. But what I'm trying to do is not trying to blame you. I'm not trying to say if there's something wrong with my marriage or relationship, it's because you and dad did a bad job. I said it's just a way for us to understand where does it come from. And that was also your first time of getting married, and you learned that from your parents, and your parents learned from their parents. There is a generational pattern, and we need to learn this pattern to recognize that we have the power to change the pattern. And this is such an important point. When we are processing family trauma, we are talking about the impact of family of origin. We often ignore it. We are adults. We have the freedom to think, behave, and make choices in every second of our life. You can make a choice of staying in your comfort zone, your default mode, and keep doing what your parents have been doing all these years. Or you can make an uncomfortable but courageous choice. Decide to do something different, something that you know is actually what you want, is actually good for you and your family. And I always like to remind people of Viktor Frankl's quote, one of my favorite quotes. He said, between stimuli and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom. It is a freedom, but it's also the responsibility to make a choice. And every day when you choose to live like everything is because how you were raised and the impact of your family and the society, you are choosing to let it impact you. Because you are free. You can say no at the same time nod your head, right? This is just a proof that no one is forcing you to be a certain way. You have the freedom to act, to behave, and to say what feels right to you. So here comes the question. What should I do when I'm thinking about my life? There is a very popular Chinese term in the younger generations called laying down, laying flat, meaning do nothing. It's a very active way for younger generation to say we don't want to have a hustle life. We don't want to do this 996, working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, sleeping in the office, and just spending my entire life and investing my health and youth at work. So people made a very radical comment. If we don't want that extreme work, then we are going to just lay back, lay flat. However, I don't think either is healthy. And in our mind, we often think about, if I cannot do 9 to 6 work to death, then I have to choose to be flat, be still, do nothing. That's not the case. despite our brain always tell us things are black or white, things are not always black and white. I discourage people when they say, I don't want to do anything. It's fine to not do anything for a day or when you're on vacation, but it becomes long term. That's not quite living a life either. So what is the middle ground? It looks very different for everyone. For me, the middle ground looks like I'm not constantly comparing myself to these super successful people who are on the social media, who are on the magazine cover, who are writing books, telling genius story about how they achieve in their early 20s, becomes a billionaire, start a startup. I'm not comparing myself to these people because that gives me extra stress of why are they able to achieve that at such a young age? Why am I not able to do it? Achieving for me is running a marathon. I'm not going to try to record all the video in a day and see all the clients in a day, and next day I'm just gonna be so tired. I'm not gonna be pushing myself every single day. I understand the important is the persistence, is the consistency of showing up every day. And to me, that is what matters. I do think that is the middle sweet spot for me, I guess also for a lot of people. I was going for a walk in the park close to home several hours ago, and I saw this old man who is using charcoal to paint the scenery. It was so beautiful. It was amazing. And I know that I couldn't do it. I don't have the art talent. As we were talking, I said, I don't think I can ever do that. And he smiled and he said, I've heard a lot of people said that, but all you need to do is you need to pick it up, try to draw something, and you're not going to be able to draw something good immediately within the first few days, first few weeks of trying. But this work takes 2 hours and 20 years. It's 20 years of constantly showing up for an hour and 2 every single day. That's what matters. This is the essence of healthy striving. Healthy striving is treating a lot of things in your life as a marathon. This is how it works in sports. This is how it works in art. This is how it works at work. If you can consistently show up, put in a work, even just a little bit amount every single day, in the long run, you are going to see something. You don't have to push yourself to the point that you are exhausted every day. Because tomorrow, how are you going to have the energy? If you work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week, I don't know how many years can you work like that. Let me know in a comment, what does it look like for you when you achieve the balance of healthy striving, that you can consciously make a choice of how much I want to achieve, how much I want to work, instead of living under the impact of your family of origin, of your generational trauma. And if you're new to this channel, please subscribe. That's the best way to support me. This is day 5 of 30 days of coming home to yourself. And in this challenge, I'm going to walk you through the psychological difficulties that we don't talk about, but we should talk about more as an immigrant or someone who's living between cultures. You can find a full course link down below in the description. Thank you for watching today's video. I will see you in the next one. Bye.